July 14, 1927, 2:35 p.m. Vincent "Vinnie Hooks" Caruso made the biggest mistake of his life. He spat on Al Capone's Cadillac. It wasn't just any Cadillac. It was a 1927 V8 Town sedan, custom-armored bulletproof glass, reinforced steel plating beneath the paint. Cost Capone $30,000, more than most men made in a decade. The car was parked outside the Metropole Hotel on South Michigan Ave. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Capone's headquarters, gleaming in the Chicago summer sun. Vinnie walked past it with 4 of his crew. He'd been drinking since noon, celebrating. His Northside operation had just pulled in $15,000 from a shipment of Canadian whiskey. Good money, the kind of money that made a man feel untouchable. Someone in Vinnie's crew, a kid named Paulie Marchetti, laughed and said, "Look at that, Vinnie. Capone's fancy car probably cost more than your whole operation." Vinnie stopped walking. He was 5'9", stocky, face like a bulldog. He'd been running bootlegging operations in Little Sicily for 3 years, working under Joe Aiello, the Sicilian boss who'd been at war with Capone since 1925. Vinnie was ambitious, hungry, and fatally stupid. "Capone thinks he owns this city," Vinnie said, his words slurred. "Thinks he can push real Sicilians around, this fat pig from Brooklyn." He walked up to the Cadillac. The driver, a man named Eddie Sullivan, sat in the front seat reading a newspaper. Eddie looked up, saw Vinnie approaching, and tensed. Vinnie leaned over and spat directly on the hood. A thick glob of saliva and tobacco juice ran down the perfect black paint. "There's what I think of Scarface in his fancy car," Vinnie said loudly, making sure everyone on the street could hear. "Tell your boss Vinnie Caruso sends his regards." Eddie Sullivan didn't say a word. He just stared at Vinnie, memorizing his face. Then he carefully folded his newspaper, started the engine, and drove away. Vinnie's crew laughed. They walked to a speakeasy on Taylor Street, drank more whiskey, told the story to anyone who'd listen. By 6 p.m., half the Italian neighborhood knew Vinnie Hooks had disrespected Al Capone's car. By 8 p.m., Capone knew. What Vinnie didn't understand, what a lot of men in 1927 Chicago didn't understand, was that Al Capone didn't become the most powerful gangster in America by letting disrespect slide. Every insult answered, every slight returned tenfold. It wasn't about pride. It was about business. If you let one man spit on your car and walk away, 10 more men would try the same thing tomorrow. Then someone would hijack your trucks. Then someone would kill your men. Respect in the underworld wasn't a courtesy. It was currency. And Capone protected his currency like Fort Knox. That night, Capone sat in his office at the Metropole Hotel with Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, his financial advisor, and Frank the Enforcer Nitti, his head of operations. Eddie Sullivan stood by the door, still furious about what he'd witnessed. "Tell me exactly what happened," Capone said quietly. He was 28 years old, already running a criminal empire worth $100 million annually. He wore a gray silk suit, diamond cufflinks, hair slicked back with pomade. Eddie described the scene. Vinnie Caruso, the spit, the disrespect, the public humiliation. Capone listened without expression. When Eddie finished, Capone was silent for a full minute. Then he looked at Frank Nitti. "Vinnie Hooks, he works for Aiello, right?" "Yeah, boss. Runs booze from the Canadian border down through Wisconsin. Small operation, maybe 8-10 guys. His social club is on Aberdeen Street, the Sicilian Brotherhood Club. That's where he does business." Capone nodded slowly. "Joe Aiello's been testing me for 2 years, sending his mutts to bark in my yard. This Vinnie, he thinks spitting on my car makes him a big man. He thinks I'm going to let it slide because he's Sicilian, because Aiello's got connections back in the old country." "You want me to grab him?" Nitti asked. "We can make it quiet. Nobody has to know." Capone shook his head. "No, not quiet. Everybody needs to know. When you disrespect Al Capone in public, you pay in public." He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Michigan Avenue. "I want his social club. The Sicilian Brotherhood on Aberdeen. I want it gone." "Gone?" Guzik asked carefully. "Gone," Capone repeated. "I want it leveled. I want it reduced to rubble. And I want everyone in this city to know why it happened." Nitti understood immediately. Dynamite? Dynamite, Capone confirmed. Frank Nitti left the Metropole Hotel at 10 p.m. with specific instructions. Make it loud, make it visible, make it a message that would echo through Chicago's underworld for years. Nitti was the perfect man for the job. Born in Italy, came to America at 12, worked his way up through Capone's organization by being smart, ruthless, and efficient. He didn't enjoy violence, he just understood it as a business tool. And this job required precision. First problem? Getting the dynamite. You couldn't just walk into a hardware store and buy explosives in 1927 Chicago. Well, you could, but it left a trail. Nitti needed untraceable materials. He called in a favor from a demolition contractor named Murray Weinstein. Murray's company, Lakeshore Construction, had legitimate contracts all over Chicago, tearing down old buildings, excavating for new developments. Murray also had a side business selling excess explosives to whoever could pay. July 15th, 11 a.m. Nitti met Murray at a warehouse in Bridgeport. Murray had a nervous energy about him, constantly wiping his hands on his pants. "How much do you need?" Murray asked. "Enough to bring down a 2-story brick building," Nitti said. Murray whistled low. "That's 50, maybe 60. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell." 50 sticks of dynamite. Properly placed, you could level half a city block. "I don't want half a block, I want one building. Clean, controlled. The buildings on either side need to stay standing." Murray thought about it. "Then you need someone who knows what they're doing. You can't just light a fuse and run. This requires engineering." "Can you do it?" Murray shook his head. "I'm a seller, not a bomber, but I know a guy. Demolition expert, worked mines in Pennsylvania before the war. Name's Thomas Kerrigan. He's expensive, but he's precise. Set up a meeting." By July 16th, Nitti had assembled his team. Thomas Kerrigan, the demolition expert, a 45-year-old Irishman with steady hands and a drinking problem. 2 drivers, Carlo Benedetto and Sam Giancana, young muscle from the Taylor Street crew. And Nitti himself to oversee everything. They met in a basement on Halsted Street. Kerrigan spread blueprints across a table. He'd somehow acquired the building plans for the Sicilian Brotherhood Club, probably from a city clerk who took bribes. 2-story structure, brick facade, wood frame interior, Kerrigan explained, tracing the layout with a thick finger. "Built in 1891. The foundation is limestone, common for that era. Load-bearing walls are here, here, and here." He marked 3 points on the blueprint with a pencil. "You place charges at these 3 points. Time to detonate simultaneously, the whole structure comes down, pancakes into its own footprint. Buildings on either side might lose windows, but they'll stand." "How many sticks?" Nitti asked. 40. 8 at each wall support, 16 in the basement near the foundation. Blasting caps, electrical detonator. We wire it all to a central switch, throw the switch from a safe distance, boom." "How long to set it up?" Kerrigan considered. "If we have access to the building, 2 hours. But this place, the Sicilian Brotherhood, there's people in there constantly. Vinny's crew uses it as headquarters, card games, meetings, booze storage." "So we need to clear it first," Nitti said, "or do it when nobody's there." Nitti shook his head. "Boss wants it loud, wants everyone to know. We do it when people are watching." Over the next 3 days, Nitti's team conducted surveillance. They learned Vinny's patterns. The Sicilian Brotherhood Club opened at noon, closed around 2 a.m. Busiest times were evenings, 8 p.m. to midnight, usually 15 to 20 men inside, drinking, playing cards, conducting business. Sunday nights were quieter. Only Vinny and 4 or 5 of his closest crew. They'd count the week's take, divide money, plan the next shipment. Sunday night, Nitti decided, July 24th. We hit them after midnight when the street's empty, but before they leave. Minimal casualties to civilians, maximum impact on Vinny's operation. There was one more problem. Security. Vinny, paranoid since the Spit incident, had stationed a guard outside the club. A kid named Rocco Napolitano, 19 years old, with a shotgun under his coat. "We need a distraction," Nitti said. Carlo Benedetto had an idea. "There's a brothel 2 blocks over, Madame Lucille's place. Rocco goes there every Sunday around 11 p.m. Stays for an hour, like clockwork." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Kid's got a thing for a redhead named Dorothy. Spends half his pay there every week." Nitti smiled for the first time. Then we make sure Dorothy's extra friendly this Sunday, and we make sure Rocco stays busy until we're done. By July 23rd, everything was in place. The dynamite was stored in a safe house on Loomis Street. Kerrigan had triple-checked his calculations. The getaway cars were stolen, license plates switched. Madame Lucille had been paid $500 to keep Rocco occupied. All they needed was the green light from Capone. That evening, Nitti went to the Metropole Hotel. Capone was eating dinner, linguine with clam sauce, a glass of Chianti. He looked up when Nitti entered. "Everything ready?" Capone asked. "Everything," Nitti confirmed. "Tomorrow night, 12:30 a.m., the Sicilian Brotherhood Club becomes a memory." Capone cut a piece of bread, dipped it in olive oil. "This Vinny, he's got family? Wife? 2 kids. They live in Cicero. After tomorrow, make sure they're taken care of. Vinny's an idiot, but his wife didn't do anything. Send them $5,000 anonymously." It was classic Capone. Brutally violent to his enemies, unexpectedly generous to innocents. It was part of his legend, part of why people in Chicago both feared and loved him. "Will do, boss." Capone raised his wine glass. "To respect Frank, and to making sure everyone remembers what happens when you forget it." July 24th, 1927, 11:47 p.m. Thomas Kerrigan sat in the back of a Ford Model A truck, surrounded by 40 sticks of dynamite, blasting caps and 2 feet of electrical wire. His hands weren't shaking. After 20 years in demolition, this was just another job. Carlo Benedetto drove. Sam Giancana rode shotgun. Frank Nitti followed in a second car, a Packard sedan, watching for police. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Police. They parked 3 blocks from the Sicilian Brotherhood Club. The street was dark, most businesses closed, residential windows dark. Chicago's summer heat had driven people inside, windows open, fans running. "Rocco?" Nitti asked Carlo. Carlo had eyes on Madame Lucille's brothel. "Went in at 11:15. Dorothy's keeping him entertained." "Good. Kerrigan, you're up." Kerrigan grabbed a canvas bag filled with dynamite and equipment. He was dressed like a workman, overalls, cap pulled low. If anyone saw him, he'd look like a night maintenance worker. The Sicilian Brotherhood Club was a 2-story brick building, windows glowing yellow on the second floor where Vinny and his crew were counting money. Ground floor was dark, a storefront that sold olive oil and pasta during the day, a front for the bootlegging operation. Kerrigan approached the building from the alley. The back door had a simple lock, picked it in 30 seconds. He entered the basement, flashlight in one hand, bag in the other. The basement smelled like damp stone and old wine. Wooden support beams ran ceiling to floor. Kerrigan moved methodically, placing charges exactly where he'd planned. 8 sticks at the north wall, 8 at the south wall, 8 at the eastern support. Each charge was wired to a blasting cap. Each blasting cap was connected to the main wire. It was like building a nervous system, every component linked, waiting for the electrical signal that would trigger simultaneous detonation. Upstairs, Vinny Caruso was drunk again. He'd just counted $8,000 from the week's whiskey sales. His crew, 4 men including his brother Angelo, were celebrating. "To Vinny Hooks," Angelo raised a glass, "the only man in Chicago with balls big enough to spit on Capone's car." They laughed. They'd been telling the story all week, embellishing it, making Vinny a legend in their own minds. What they didn't know was that 5 days earlier, Capone had said, "I want everyone in this city to know why it happened." Kerrigan finished wiring the basement in 47 minutes. He moved to the ground floor, placed the remaining 16 sticks along the interior, load-bearing walls. The electrical wire ran from each charge, through the basement, out the back door, across the alley, to a pile of trash bins where Nitti waited. At 12:28 a.m., Kerrigan emerged from the building, walked calmly to the alley, and nodded to Nitti. "It's ready. When you push the detonator, the whole thing goes. 3-second delay." Nitti looked at the building. Lights still on upstairs. He could hear music, laughter. Vinny Caruso and his crew, oblivious. For a moment, just a moment, Nitti considered calling it off. This was going to kill people. Not in a shootout, not in a fight, but in an explosion they'd never see coming. Then he remembered Capone's words. "When you disrespect Al Capone in public, you pay in public." Nitti connected the detonator, a small electrical switch connected to a car battery. He looked at Carlo and Sam. "Get the cars running. Soon as this goes, we move." They nodded, disappeared to their vehicles. Nitti took a breath, pushed the switch. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the basement exploded. The sound was apocalyptic, not a single boom, but a cascading roar as 40 sticks of dynamite detonated simultaneously. The limestone foundation shattered. The load-bearing walls disintegrated. The entire structure, 36 years of brick and mortar, collapsed inward. The second floor, where Vinny and his crew had been drinking, dropped straight down. No time to run, no time to scream. The building pancaked exactly as Kerrigan had designed, folding into its own footprint in less than 4 seconds. A cloud of dust and debris exploded outward. Windows shattered in buildings half a block away. Car alarms that didn't exist in 1927 would have been screaming. Instead, it was dogs barking, people shouting, the sound of Chicago waking up to violence. Nitti was already in the Packard. Carlo drove. They were 3 blocks away before the first police siren started wailing. The Sicilian Brotherhood Club, where Vinny Caruso had celebrated his disrespect of Al Capone, was now a pile of rubble. 5 men were buried in the debris. It would take rescue workers 8 hours to dig out the bodies. Vinny Hooks Caruso was found near what used to be the second-floor card table. His brother Angelo was found near him. The other 3 crew members were identified by their dental records. By 2 a.m., every cop in Chicago knew what happened. By 3 a.m., every newspaper had reporters on the scene. By dawn, the headline in the Chicago Tribune read, "Bombing destroys social club, 5 dead in Little Sicily blast." What the newspapers didn't know, what the police couldn't prove, was why it happened. But the underworld knew. Word spread through speakeasies and gambling dens, through brothels and warehouse offices. Vinny Caruso spat on Al Capone's car. Al Capone erased him from existence. July 25, 1927, 8:80 a.m. Al Capone sat in his suite at the Metropole Hotel, reading 3 different newspapers. Each one had a slightly different version of the story, but all agreed on the basic facts. Explosion, 5 dead, no suspects, police investigating. Frank Nitti sat across from him, exhausted. He hadn't slept since the bombing. "Any heat?" Capone asked, without looking up from the Tribune. "Nothing that leads to us. Kerrigan cleaned up good. No witnesses saw our cars. The detonator's at the bottom of Lake Michigan. The dynamite can't be traced." Capone nodded, turned a page. "The police? They know it wasn't an accident. Chief of Detectives Morgan called it a professional demolition job. But they've got no evidence, no suspects. They're putting pressure on Joe Aiello's crew, thinking it's a Sicilian internal war." That made Capone smile. Let them think that. Aiello's got enough problems. He was right. Joe Aiello, the Sicilian boss who'd been backing Vinny Caruso, was in a precarious position. The bombing had wiped out one of his operations and sent a clear message. Supporting anyone who disrespected Capone came with consequences. By July 27th, Aiello had sent an intermediary to the Metropole Hotel, a lawyer named Antonio Lombardo, respected by both sides, acting as a neutral party. Capone received him in his office. Lombardo was nervous, sweating through his expensive suit. "Don Aiello sends his respects," Lombardo began carefully. "He wants you to know he had no knowledge of Vincent Caruso's actions. The disrespect shown to you was not sanctioned, not approved." Capone let him talk. When Lombardo finished, Capone poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to the lawyer. "Vinny Caruso was a stupid man, and if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell," Capone said. "Stupid men make stupid choices. I don't hold Joe Aiello responsible for one man's stupidity." Lombardo relaxed slightly. "Don Aiello is grateful for your understanding. But," Capone continued, his voice hardening, "Aiello needs to understand something. This city has rules. You don't disrespect another man's property. You don't disrespect another man's name. Not in public, not ever." "Of course, Mr. Capone. Vinny Caruso spat on my car. He did it in front of witnesses. He bragged about it. If I let that slide, every 2-bit hustler in Chicago thinks they can do the same. You understand?" "I understand." Capone stood, walked to the window. "I'm not an unreasonable man, Antonio. I don't start wars over nothing, but I finish them. You tell Aiello that Vinny's debt is paid. His family got money anonymously. His crew is gone. We're done with this." Lombardo nodded, relieved. "I'll convey the message. And, Antonio, one more thing. If anyone else in Aiello's organization decides they want to test me, decides they want to make a reputation by disrespecting Al Capone, you tell them what happened to Vinny Hooks. You tell them about the Sicilian Brotherhood Club. You make sure they understand." The message was clear. This wasn't just about Vinny Caruso anymore. It was about establishing a precedent, drawing a line that nobody would cross again. Within a week, the story had traveled beyond Chicago. Bootleggers in Detroit heard about it. Gangsters in New York heard about it. Even the old-world mafia bosses in Sicily heard about it. Al Capone had leveled an entire building with dynamite because someone spat on his car. It was excessive. It was theatrical. It was perfect. The bombing of the Sicilian Brotherhood Club became part of Capone's legend. Not because it was the deadliest thing he'd ever ordered, it wasn't. Not because it was the most strategic, other hits had more political impact, but because it demonstrated something essential about power in the criminal underworld. Respect isn't maintained by being the toughest. It's maintained by being unpredictable, by responding to small insults with overwhelming force, by making examples that people remember. Every gangster in Chicago got the message. You could compete with Capone. You could negotiate with him. You could even fight him if you had the resources. But you couldn't disrespect him, not publicly, not without consequences. Joe Aiello learned that lesson. He backed off his territorial disputes with Capone for the next year, focusing his operations outside Capone's reach. It didn't save him. Aiello was eventually killed in 1930, but that was a different war for different reasons. The police investigation into the bombing went nowhere. Detective Chief William Morgan suspected Capone's involvement. Everyone in Chicago suspected it, but suspicion wasn't evidence. The case remained officially unsolved. Years later, in 1931, when federal prosecutors were building their tax evasion case against Capone, they tried to connect him to the Sicilian Brotherhood bombing. They failed. No witnesses, no evidence, no conviction. Thomas Kerrigan, the demolition expert, died in 1934 from cirrhosis of the liver, his role in the bombing unknown to history. Murray Weinstein, the explosives supplier, lived until 1952, never once mentioning his involvement. Frank Needy eventually became the head of the Chicago outfit after Capone went to prison, carrying the lessons of that night with him. And Capone's Cadillac? He kept driving it for another 3 years, kept it polished, kept it perfect. A symbol of power on Chicago's streets. Nobody ever spat on it again. The story became a cautionary tale in the underworld. Old gangsters would tell young hustlers, "You know what happened to Vinny Hooks? He disrespected Capone's car. 1 week later, his whole social club was rubble." It was a reminder that in the world of organized crime, perception was reality. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Power wasn't just about how many men you had or how much money you made. It was about how you responded when challenged. It was about making sure that every slight, every disrespect, every challenge to your authority was answered decisively. Capone understood this better than anyone. He built an empire not just on bootlegging and gambling, but on reputation. And reputation required maintenance. It required examples. Vinny Caruso became that example, a footnote in history, a name most people don't remember. But in Chicago's underworld in the late 1920s, everyone knew his story. They knew that on July 14, 1927, Vinny Hooks made the biggest mistake of his life. He spat on Al Capone's Cadillac. 10 days later, he was dead, buried under 2 stories of brick and mortar, a victim of his own arrogance and Capone's calculated fury. The message was sent. The message was received. And for the rest of Al Capone's reign over Chicago, nobody ever forgot it.